All right, so this is part 3 to my labor and delivery story. I'm just going over some details right after she was born and then the rest of our hospital stay and our experience with jaundice. So I think I forgot to mention in part 2, I don't know how I forgot to mention, she was born at 2:55 p.m. on February the 7th. I believe I mentioned her weight. It was 8 pounds, 15 ounces, and she was 20.5 inches long. So she was definitely a big girl, chunky little panda bear, and we're totally in love. Um, so, so that was February the 7th. Okay, so fast forward to February the 8th. She got checked out by the pediatrician, just like all of the babies do at the hospital. And the pediatrician came into our room a couple hours later to tell us about the tests that they do routinely and basically just told us, congratulations, she's beautiful. We talked about breastfeeding, everything was great. And he just said everything was great. And that was around, I want to say, like 12, in the afternoon, right? And she was almost 1 day old at this point in time. So about 5:30 p.m. that night, my husband had gone to pick my mom up from the airport or something. He had gone somewhere where he needed to be gone for like an hour or so. So of course, during that 1 hour that he wasn't there, my postpartum nurse came in. God bless her soul. She was a very nice lady, but she just kind of came off like the lights are on but nobody's home. She just didn't seem with it. Like she was super nice, but she just didn't seem very informed or even very focused on like what she was doing, which is not the greatest feeling when it's your nurse. So with that said, around 5:30 p.m., so Natalie was over a day old at this point. This was February the 8th. She came in and she was like, I was breastfeeding the baby, and she was like, oh, the pediatrician called me, the same pediatrician that we had already met in person, who told us our baby was healthy and everything was great. And she said, he is concerned that Natalie might be jaundice and might have a little bit of jaundice. And he wants her to go under the lights in the nursery. And we want to do that as soon as possible. And so, of course, my first reaction was, why didn't he say anything when he came in here and met with us? And then my second thought was, of course, yeah, put her under the lights. I've heard about jaundice. I know it's really common. It doesn't seem to be all that serious for most babies. I know it can be very serious, but it seems like there's just a lot of babies who are a little bit jaundiced. They go under the lights. After a day or two, they're fine. So I was concerned. I wasn't happy about it, but I was aware that it was something that's common. So she told me that Natalie's score was a 9.6 and they like to see it under a 10. And so the doctor was concerned that her number was so close to 10, so he wanted to prevent it from getting worse by putting her under the lights, which made complete sense to me. So again, this was around 5:30 p.m. So I said, okay, that's fine. I said, so what about breastfeeding? Like, when will she be back? And she said, oh, she'll stay there all night. That's when I was like, what? She'll stay in the nursery all night? Like, what do you mean? And so that's when it became really frustrating. Like, the lights are on, but no one's home. She wasn't giving me the details that I needed. And so basically she told me if I wanted to breastfeed, like it was an option, she was like, if you want to breastfeed, you need to go to the nursery every 2 to 3 hours during the night to feed her. And so I'm thinking, you've got to be kidding me. Like, if I want to breastfeed, so if I wouldn't have asked, you wouldn't have told me that you were taking her for the entire night. And mind you, she just came into my room to get the baby. Like, she didn't prepare me for any of this or say, we're going to come back in a half an hour and get her. Like, there was no preparation. So I don't mean to be overly dramatic. I know a lot of worse things happen to people, and this is very minor in the scheme of things, but it was really upsetting the way that it happened. To me. So anyway, so they take her to what they call the nursery, which I then found out is actually the NICU. They have the NICU and then the nursery is right next to the NICU, but where the lights are and everything is in the NICU. And so they have certain hours where you can't be in there. It's like 1 or 2 hours, from like 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. and from like 6 to 9 a.m. or something like that. So she was taking her right before the 2 to 3 hour, I believe it was 3 hours if I got those hours right, where you can't even be in there. And so I went from, this happy high bliss, just loving my baby and just being so excited, to being very concerned about them taking her and our breastfeeding, and then her jaundice and just all of that. So it was really, really upsetting for me. My husband came back and, of course, was completely caught off guard by all this happening, like I was. And so that night we went to the nursery every 2 to 3 hours for the entire night, which was exhausting, but there really wasn't any other option. The first time we went, she still latched on and everything was fine. The second time we went, I guess it would have been around midnight, maybe 1 o'clock in the morning. She was, under the lights, which are very, very warm. She was lethargic. I mentioned in my breastfeeding update about this. She was lethargic, I believe, because she's jaundiced and because of being under those lights, and she could not hardly latch on. It was just exhausting. And so again, we went every 2 to 3 hours, and it kind of just continuously got worse. She wasn't really eating, and if you've ever dealt with jaundice, all you want them to do is to eat. And so I was told, that it would be good to consider supplementing with formula or using a nipple shield or doing something to get her to eat. So I started using the nipple shield, and it helped a little bit. It definitely wasn't that easy, but it did help a little bit. So the following morning, my doctor came in the room and checked in on us. And basically what made me so upset was that I later found out that what the nurse had originally told me about the numbers was not accurate. At that point in time, when she told me that Natalie's number was a 9.6, but they wanted to see it lower than a 10, which it was, but it was just on the high side of normal. It was really that her number should have been an 8, and it was a 9.6. So the information she gave me was not accurate. Her jaundice was more serious than I realized. And also that following morning, which was February the 9th, I was supposed to be discharged like by noon. And so it hit me that they were going to discharge me and not discharge her. And again, I want to be sensitive to people who have gone through anything like this or anything worse, because there's so many worse things that could happen. And I know, if your baby's in the NICU, you're lucky if it's jaundice, really, unless it's really serious jaundice, because there are a lot worse things that people go through. So I am aware of that, and I don't mean to sound dramatic or, I don't know, just ungrateful for pretty much having a healthy baby. But I never realized how terrible the feeling is of thinking you're going to be discharged without your baby, regardless of if you have other children, but especially if you have other children. We had to coordinate everything for our son while we were in the hospital. And then to think of coming home without our little girl, and how confusing and upsetting that would be to him, and just how heart-wrenching that was for us. So thankfully, that was not the case. They ended up letting me and my husband stay at the hospital until around 5 p.m. that night, and her numbers had improved enough that they felt like it was safe for her to go home. But we did not know that until 4 p.m. So basically it was basically a 24-hour period of time where we just didn't really know anything. So that was just really stressful. Anyway, I probably said the same thing like 5 times. She ended up coming home with us, so that was great. And then for the following 6 days, we brought her to the doctor every day but one. Well, back to the hospital, to the outpatient part of the hospital, to get her heel pricked and get her bilirubin numbers checked. And they continued to not be that great. Like, they weren't that high of numbers, but they weren't decreasing like they should. So finally, I think on the 5th time, which was the 6th day of doing this, her numbers went down enough to where they felt like we didn't have to bring the lights home or do anything with it, and breastfeeding had gotten better at that point. So it all worked out and it was all good. But I just wanted to share my experience, just in case anyone happens to watch this, and maybe you could know that this is something that happens, and or if you've been through it, I'm sure you understand. And again, it really made me think about the people and the babies that I saw when I was in the NICU that are just teeny tiny and have all the tubing hooked up to them and all of that. It just made me think about all of that a little bit more, and to be really grateful to just be able to take this precious baby home. So anyway, that is pretty much my labor and delivery experience. It was good. It was full of a lot of highs and a few lows. Um, and yeah, if anyone has any questions or anything like that, just let me know. And thanks for watching.